Good afternoon, good morning, and indeed good evening, wherever you are dialing in from in the world. I am looking at my chat, and straight away I can see we've got people joining from the Philippines, from Vegas, Virginia. Please put in the chat where you're joining us from today, just so I can get a sense of the size of our global audience. And thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have your company for the next half an hour. If you've been with us on the last couple of webinars, welcome back. For those of you who are new to our webinars, thank you for making the time, taking the time out of your busy day. Going to give you some interesting stuff today on product-based versus value-based selling. So this webinar is going to be slightly different. It's going to be stat-free. So there's going to be no research. It's going to be my opinions that I'm sharing with you today. But also I want your opinions. I want your insights, your perspectives. So stay with me for about 30 minutes and interact. So challenge my thinking. So I'm going to give you some very different opinions today, some different perspectives, some ideas, some things that might help you in your day-to-day selling role. But I want you to share yours as well. I can see over here on my left, we've got plenty of people joining from Gloucester, from Birmingham, from Northern Virginia. It's all very great to have you here, from Atlanta as well. So share your perspectives on what I'm going to talk about, because it's great to know. I've got ideas, but you'll have ideas too. I've been in the sales transformation world now for the last 15 years. It's gone by in a blink of an eye. And then in sales for longer than I care to remember, but so have you. So let's share that. Let's work together on this next half an hour and give our different perspectives around what we're going to cover off today. So hello, Bristol, London, Israel. Good afternoon from the Wirral. Great to have so many people on. So let's get into this. Let's start with an image, as you can see on screen. There's a bowl of spaghetti. Now, I like spaghetti, but a modern sales process somehow represents a bowl of spaghetti in many ways, because it's no longer a linear process. We don't start and follow stages in a sequential way. Now, there's many reasons for this, not least the fact that over the course of the last couple of years, things have really changed. Priorities have changed within our customer organizations. More buyers are getting involved. And by the way, those buyers don't all have the same requirements. And our solutions are becoming increasingly complex. So as individuals, we need a team around us that are going to help us. So if you can imagine just for a moment, our sales process and the customer's buying process, it kind of looks a little bit like a bowl of spaghetti, in that it's so complicated, where everything is interwoven and people are joining at different times, and people are looking and interested in different things, that we have to be really agile in what we do as professional sellers. But people still buy for a reason. Here's 4 reasons that people tend to buy. We want to save something. And what can that be? It can mean different things for different people. We want to solve a problem, whatever that might be. And that might be moving away from something, or it might be moving towards something. Indeed, many of the problems that we solve are for future-facing challenges to make our companies and our customers future-proof. Might want to increase something. In sales, it can be customer satisfaction. It can be making sure that we increase the retention of our talent within our organization. It can be that we increase revenue with our solutions. Many different things. And again, in the chat, put ideas of what you see in save, solve, and increase. And here's the thing. Quite often, we buy things for emotional reasons. I know personally, I do this all the time. I'll buy something, 2 days later, I'll go, I wonder why I bought that. I must have had 4 Apple Watches over the last 4 years because it looks really cool. But then I get into using it and I'm so easily distracted. I get into a meeting and it's no longer useful for me. So the emotional purchase is there, but then common factors kick in. I go, why did I do that? I'm sure we've all been there over the years. I like that master the twirl, David, on the bowl of spaghetti piece. So our customers are still buying for a reason. Remember, the context of this webinar today is product versus value selling. Is there a right or wrong answer to what we should be doing? Does it matter what we do in the eyes of our customer? Well, we're going to explore that. So here's our agenda. As I mentioned, half an hour. We're going to look really at these 3 key areas. First things first, let's focus on the buyer's needs. What does it mean? Second thing, let's make sure we get the value right. Now, by that, I mean, in some cases, value is that something just works, and it can be very product related. And then thirdly, and you'll hear me say this more than once, it is always about the customer. In what we do in sales, it is and always will be about the customer. If we do the right things for our customer, then we'll get the right outcomes for us, for our organization. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring 4 myths to you as we go through this. And then I'm going to pause and I'm going to get you to respond to some of these myths, and then we'll explore them as we go through in a little bit more detail. So let's start off, shall we, with myth number 1. We either sell in a product or value-based way. Go to your chat. Do we sell either in a product or a value-based way? Are they completely independent of each other? Bob, good morning from Dallas, by the way. Just looking at the chat. Lee, good afternoon from Manchester, North Carolina. Danielle, good morning from you. So the myth number 1, we sell either in a product or value-based way. What do you think about that? Let me give you an example. So I'm sure we've all got smartphones, and over the years, you've probably had more charging cables than you care to admit to. I do. Certainly in my house, there's 5 of us, 3 sons. We break them. They go missing. They fall down the back of cupboards. And we constantly seem to be online buying charging cables. So you could think, well, actually, that's a product sale. That's what you're doing with that. You're buying a product. But let me flip the script just for a moment. What if I didn't have one? How would that impact my productivity, my communication, my ability to engage my colleagues, my customers, my family, my friends, if I didn't have that way to communicate? So with one simple idea, that could be construed as a product sale, but actually, for me, it's really important. It gives me value, because without the charge within my phone, there's lots of things I can't do. So in chat, what we get in here, they're not mutually exclusive. Product leads to value. Nice. Value-based is what is important to the customers, not you. Hold that thought, Chris. We're going to come back to that. Bob says, nope. We use the product to create value for the customer. It's a confluence. That's a great word, Bob. Thank you for that. Carolina, they're linked. Good. Okay, so let's see. Here's some of the more traditional thinking. Products might focus on the features and advantages. So product selling can sometimes be fast. It can be transactional. It can be repeat business. It can be focused more inwardly. I don't believe these, by the way, but I'm just sharing some of the thoughts of what we've heard over the years. Few buyers involved, whereas value can be more involved, more buyers, can be a bigger virtual team, more complicated. Remember that bowl of spaghetti that we said earlier? So hold the thought. What we're hearing on the chat, and by the way, keep going on the chat. This is really good. It's both. It's both product and value in what we do in professional selling. I agree with that, and we're going to prove that right over the course of the next 22 or so minutes. So let's go to myth number 2 then. This might be a controversial one, but I like a little bit of controversy on a Thursday afternoon. The customer is always right. Go to your chat. What do you think? Is the customer always right? So just a few more comments on this about the pain factors and use cases. Absolutely, it is. Value-based is what is important to the customer. I mentioned that earlier. Is the customer always right, though? Let me give you my perspective. No. And let me tell you why. The customer is right based on what they know. Now, imagine for one moment that a customer is looking to buy a solution from your organization, and they know some of what you're able to offer, and they ask you for a quote, for a proposal. They go into an RFP without knowing a lot of the other services and solutions that you can provide. Now, imagine you just sell what they're asking for without asking additional questions, challenging their thinking, bringing different perspectives, finding out what value represents. You may give them something that they feel is right, that as you then move forward, it ends up being wrong. So the customer is always right based on what they know. If you can bring different ideas, different perspectives, different innovations, you can challenge their thinking of what they believe is right today to give them a different perspective in the future. My attention span is really short, by the way. And over in my peripheral vision, I can see the chat lighting up around this myth. So let me have a look. We got, is the customer always right? Well, not always. I like that one, Imran. Danielle, not always. In a word, no, Danielle. Nice. So we're in alignment here. We're in alignment. The customer is not always right. They are right based on what they believe they know. Our job as professional sellers is to challenge their thinking. So we have different people that we sell to, everybody. All of the time we have our C-level. We have our technical buyers. We have our operational buyers. We have financial buyers. And they have different requirements. They have different perspectives on what they believe they need. And indeed, for your solutions that you're selling, what they perceive as value in each of those cases is not the same. A financial buyer might be looking at return on investment, whereas a technical buyer might be more happy that the product works, that it's not going to give me any challenges downstream, that it's going to free my time up, which is value-based. Now, if you overlay this with some of the other considerations, what's the company culture? What do they focus on? Are we talking to the right functions? Indeed, who is involved now in some of these purchases? Are we talking to all of the right people? Think about an opportunity that you're working on today. It's within your pipeline. Are you talking to all the people within all the functions that are affected by the opportunity that you're working on? How does their value differ in their different functions? What are their priorities? Now, we've all seen, everybody, priorities shifting significantly over the last couple of years. Priorities will shift again over the next 12 months as we respond to some global incidents, as we respond to costs of living, as we respond to a balancing of economies. So priorities are going to shift again. What's represented as value will shift again. And then we've got to think about people. It's always about the customer. Do we understand the individual? Do we understand the person behind the purchase? Do we seek to understand enough about them personally or not? So we have to focus on the buyer's needs. They're not going to be the same. They're going to be different. Some absolutely will want to see your product, your service, make sure it works. Others will be more concerned around the outcome that you are able to enable and therefore the value. Let me just have a quick look at some of the chats. Many customers struggle to figure out what their solution options are. It's a process of education along an arc of stakeholders and business needs. So our job as professional sellers is one of enabling decision making through our expertise. It's helping to co-create the outcome based on what we're able to offer and joining the dots to what they're able to get by receiving that from us. So it's really important. Again, okay, so we got the note in there. Right, great. So focus on the buyer's needs, and the continuum of value is different. The value in each person's case is different. So here's a tip for you, and I'm going to give you 4 as we go through this session. Now, this might sound really simple, by the way. Number 1, resist the temptation to pitch too soon. So in my work working with organizations, I see this very often. We ask 1 or 2 questions. We think we know what value is. We think we know what the customer wants. We move quickly into doing some sort of pitch, demo, or presentation. So resist that temptation, because when we engage other people, when we understand that second, third, or fourth line of question that really uncovers the need behind the need, our opportunity may expand. The average order value may increase. And the value that we give back to the customer will probably increase proportionately as well. So my tip number 1 is resist the temptation to pitch too soon. Last week, my son's just started a new job in a car dealership, and he had to do a demonstration to a customer, a fictitious customer. And he said, right, I'm going to ask these questions. I said, great. What are you going to do next? He said, well, I'm going to tell them about all the features within the car. And I said, okay. What if you didn't do that? What if you asked them a few more questions to find out more about what they need? Yeah, I could do that. So he asked 1 or 2 more questions. So what are you going to do now? He said, right, I'm going to tell them all about this, that. I said, whoa. Hold on. Find out as much as you can first before you then move on to the demonstration, because you can bring the context to that. So we've all done this over the years. We've all been too quick to move off of the customer requirement onto the solution. Tip 1, resist the temptation to pitch too soon. Okay, let's move forward. So we're now going to move into the second part of the agenda, getting value right. Here we go. Myth number 3. So value must be agreed by consensus across the buying team. So I'm just reading some of the notes as we respond on our chat to this. Simon says, like a doctor, ask and diagnose before prescribing. Absolutely, Simon. Really important that we do that. What we see within Mentor and the clients we work with is if we can resist that temptation to pitch, average order values definitely increase. Now, it might mean that you have to increase the number of stakeholders that you're engaging. So you've got to have a great deal of fluency around tailoring your conversation to different KPIs of different buyers. No question about that. We help customers with that all of the time. But you get involved with more people, you get more velocity in the opportunity and higher average order values. So, Chris, validate the assumed buying motives and business objectives first and foremost. Absolutely. Hello, Marco. Myth number 3, value must be agreed by consensus across the buying team. What do we think about that? Well, here's 5 levels of value that we might think about when we look at customer value. Base value and economic value. Base value is we understand the customer need and we understand to a degree why they're doing it. And economic value, we can start to understand the return. Now, 1 and 2, you would argue, are pretty foundational, pretty fundamental, regardless of what we're selling. We need to understand those 2 levels. If we start to get above that, what you could argue, added value, personal value, and aspirational value then come into play. Added value is difficult to do if we don't ask enough questions because we don't understand the totality of the requirement that we're looking to solve for. Personal value is often missed because sometimes we can feel it's a bit intrusive by asking those questions. But remember what we said earlier, people buy for emotional reasons. They'll often justify it through business reasons. So if we don't understand the so what from a personal perspective, we could be missing a really key differentiator in value for that individual. And then aspirational value. Imagine you sell a solution today that expires within 12 months. Now, imagine again, if you can sell a solution to a customer that will extend beyond 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, because you understand the aspirational future of their business. You understand what they're looking to achieve for the longer term. How much more of a trusted advisor will you bring to that customer by doing exactly that? Now, the one thing I'll say about this is you don't need all 5 of these for all buyers. You have to, again, understand the buyer, understand what's important to them, and then bring the appropriate level of value to them. I'm just going to look at some of the comments. We've got value is relative. Yes, it is. Absolutely. Depends on the requirements. Paul, always depends on the requirements. That's why we need to seek first to understand. But if you look at our value equation, these are some of the factors that we absolutely need to find out to contextualize value across these 5 areas. Do we understand the business impact? So why change? What's going on within their business that means that they need to do something differently? On a product basis, it could be something as simple as something is not working that needs to be replaced. Because it's not working, it's leading to inefficiencies within the organization. It can be very simple like that. Do we understand the personal impact? Just touched on this a moment ago. If you take nothing away from this webinar today, apart from this, is really understand the buyer and understand what it means for them when you get the solution right. What value will it bring to them? Because we buy for emotional reasons. Then what we've got to control is 2 things. We've got to control the perception of cost. So in the absence of value, there is only cost. So if we can't articulate return, that's when we get into a negotiation around cost. The other thing that humans don't like is risk. So if you're going into a new customer, you've never worked with them before. Yes, you may be giving them a product, but unless you can prove that you are credible, reliable, and they see you as risky, then that is definitely going to reduce their perception of value in you and your organization. So there's 4 factors. The first 2 we need to dial up. The second 2 we need to control. The way we control is by really understanding our customer and understanding what value represents to them. So there's 4 factors. There's going to be more on this, by the way. If you want to learn more about the value equation after this webinar today, I'll give you a vehicle for doing that. So here's tip number 2. And thanks for some of the chats, by the way, that I've seen. It resonates with what I'm about to tell you here. Tip number 2 is this: value is in the eye of the beholder. So be ready to share value at an individual and a group level. If you're doing a presentation, you need to look for consensus. But where you've got more buyers than ever involved, we need to work that a little bit harder, be a little bit more agile in sales, and understand at the individual level what makes them say yes, what it means for them personally. And if we can operate at both of those levels, we are far more likely to be more successful more often. So let's see what we've got on here. A couple of comments. ROI is key. It's always key, absolutely. More so to financial buyers than anybody else. We should be road mapping. Yep. Value definitely depends on the requirements. And then sales is an investigatory process. That's not easy for me to say. Learn what the customer issues are and have an empathetic process. Empathy being rooted in emotion, building rapport, all very important. So I mentioned right at the beginning, it is always about the customer. So here's myth number 4, the final one of today's webinar. And I want to get all your perspectives in chat if I can, please. So myth number 4 is this, and this is going back to the whole point of this webinar. What's the difference between product versus value selling? I need to know more my product in detail to be credible. Do you need to know your product in detail to be credible? Whether you're going into new business conversations, you're trying to grow within existing accounts, regardless of the size of the company, I need to know my product in detail to be more credible. Let's see what you come up with in chat. So let me just play with this a little bit while we're looking into your chat comments. Now just imagine you've got a nominal scale, 1 to 7, around your knowledge of your product, your propositions within your organization. And let's say you're the account owner. And let's just say for a moment that you've got this scale between, I don't know anything, no knowledge, to I've got level 7, I'm an expert. To what level do you need to have knowledge to be credible to the customer? Does it need to be 7 all the time, or do you need to be a level 1? The myth is I need to know my product in detail to be credible. The reality in modern day selling is quite different. Let's say for a moment that you were a level 3, 4. So you understand your product to a degree where you can initiate a customer conversation. You can talk about the likely value that solution is going to bring, but that's pretty much it. So if you start getting into a conversation about the detail, technically how stuff works, maybe you're not there yet. And let me give you an example of that. So in Mentor, we have a proposition called Kairos. Kairos is a digital learning platform. Essentially, it allows users to go online to consume content relevant to what they're looking for when they want to, based on what they need. So if you want to learn about negotiation, you would go in here. You can do some RISE modules. You can look at videos. You can look at tools around negotiation. What that does is it then addresses the need for different learning styles across organizations. No question about that. The way I learn versus the way my sons learn is very, very different. They prefer to learn in their own time, on demand, and consume information. I learn in a different way. So I know that I could have a credible conversation with one of my customers and talk about that, no problem at all. Now, if you ask me how it works technically, how the architecture behind the solution works, I'm not going to know that. Now, I would argue I don't need to know that, but I do know somebody within the organization who does know that, and they know it very, very well. So that's okay, because the point is, in professional selling, we certainly need to be able to start that conversation with the customer. We do need to be credible in knowing the value that we can bring, or the perceived value that we can bring, and how something works to an extent. But then we bring the right people in across the virtual team. We bring the right subject matter expertise into the right conversations with the right customers. You remember those 4 types of buyer we talked about earlier? So technical, operational, executive, financial. They're not going to want to know the ins and outs of every one of the products. So I wouldn't go and talk to them or bring my subject matter in at that time, because it wouldn't be necessary. It wouldn't be worth it. When we do bring them into the right conversations at the right time, that's when we fly in formation. So my view on this myth is, yes, you need to know stuff about your product. There's no question about that. You need to understand the likely customer outcomes and value that you can bring, and of course qualify that. But you don't need to know everything. You do need to have people within your team who've got that higher level of technical knowledge, of detailed knowledge, and then you need to know when to bring them in at the right time. That's how things are shifting, and that allows you to scale your conversations in many opportunities. So this has obviously been a very interesting myth, this one, because I can see a lot going through. So what have we got on here? Product detail is only as important as the business outcomes that are enabled. Yes, absolutely. And we must know both. So go back to what we said at the beginning. Features and advantages describe your product. Benefits, well, they describe the outcomes. And that's what we need to understand a bit about. In my opinion, I need to know to be perceived as a trusted advisor and consultant. Absolutely. So you need to bring value into that conversation at the beginning, and then know when to bring the right people in to support and help you. Imran says you just need to demonstrate you understand their needs and show that you can work with them to deliver to expectations within your wider team. Team selling is so important, everybody. Working together as a virtual team, flying in formation towards a common goal, bringing the right people in to build the right relationships at the right levels within our customers is so vitally important now. Let me just see what else. I wouldn't say you need a deeper level of the product I'm selling, but being able to say that you truly understand their problems, because okay. So a similar thread there, Danielle. And then Houghton is talking about Kairos. Thank you for that, Houghton. So here's the tip from this one, team. We need to know our product to a confident level. We certainly need to know it from an outcomes-based perspective as we're going into these conversations with our contacts. Be able to talk about it to a confident level, and then know when to engage other subject matter experts to support you and give the customer the very best customer experience. Remember, it's always about the customer. So we need to do what's right within our infrastructure to bring differentiated thinking, number one, to a confident level, and then bring in the virtual team to be able to support us. That's a skill, no question about that. And that's something that we've helped customers with many, many times. So that's tip number 3. Team selling, double thumbs up, David. Absolutely right. Sometimes sales can feel like an isolated pursuit. Trust me on this. When we can sell as a team and we can use the strength of the team to give the very best customer experience, it's more enjoyable and it's certainly more rewarding on both sides. No question about that. Simple rule to follow. Don't click on a push a button unless you know exactly what is going to happen next. Yes. Tip number 4. Join the dots between your product and the value for your customer. So they're different ends of that continuum I showed at the beginning. But tip number 4 is, as professional sellers, we have to make sense of what our propositions do in the eyes of the customer. So we have to help them navigate that by joining the dots between what it is we do and what it is they'll receive, those change outcomes, those benefits that they'll get through our propositions. Andy says, get the customer to start thinking critically, put them in the movie, get them involved, Andy. Get them involved, co-create, take them on the journey with you. No question that is the right thing to do in modern selling. So here's some conclusions. Said about half an hour. We're going to be bang on. So the first myth was this one. We sell either in a product or value-based way. They're part of the same continuum. So we have to be agile enough to understand our buyer, to do the right thing for them, to bring the appropriate response in at the right time to deliver true value. And if that is demonstrating that our product works, that it's going to be robust for their business, that is what we do. And then, of course, we have to join the dots to value. So myth number 1 is part of the same continuum. Myth number 2, customer is always right. I was wondering how this one might go, if I'm honest, when I raised this one, but actually everybody's saying the same thing. The customer's not always right. So they're right in what they know. But if we resist that temptation to pitch too soon, we ask them questions, we can change their thinking. We can bring ideas, innovations, creativity into the conversation that gets them thinking differently. So their view is what is right changes, it adjusts, it adapts. And we're seen as a trusted advisor through the conversations that we can bring. Myth number 3 was value must be agreed across the buying team by consensus. Well, value's in the eye of the beholder. So actually what we must do is make sure that we're talking to all the people within the buying process, that we understand the group consensus, and we understand the individual requirements. That's going to make a big difference for sure. And then finally, I need to know my product in detail to be credible. Well, what we've said is you need to be confident enough to raise your propositions in light of the customer outcomes. And then you definitely need to be skilled to join the dots towards customer value. So what we've covered is 3 things. We've covered focusing on the buyer's needs. We've focused on making sure we get the value right, and we've talked in detail about that. And we always finish off on, it's always about the customer. Everything that we should be doing should be focused on the customer. And given that they're not always right and that we can bring differentiated thinking, what could you do differently in a meeting that you've got coming up that gets the customer thinking differently? So that's it. That's where we are on this webinar. I hope you've taken 1 or 2 things away that's been useful. I thank you very much for the detail that you've put into the chat. If you've got any questions, put those in. We'll stay on for a little bit. What I would say to you is if you want to chat about any of this in more detail, and believe me, I'll be very happy to talk to anybody about this stuff because it's so important. Drop me an email. This is my email address on here. If you do so, we'll send you some details around the value equation, those 4 key areas, which I think will bring some value back to you. In the meantime, thank you for taking the time out. We appreciate you joining us today. Email me for further information, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you.